Thank you, Daniela, and good afternoon and good evening to our audience, wherever you are around the world. Thanks to ACC for the privilege of this mic. I am Sabrina Hannam, the CEO of Boardswell, a B2B technology-enabled ESG marketplace that leverages proprietary technology to successfully match high caliber people of color for executive and board roles, including in sports organization. As a high-octane executive, corporate board director, and award-winning thought leader, I'm fortunate to have advised some of the world's brightest minds in the financial, sports, and technology industries. I serve as advisor on compensation issues, including cap table ownership and analysis, monetary reward packages, say-on pay for CEO, C-suite, and non-employee director compensation, and oversee compensation and equity structure for CEOs' direct reports. I also lead compensation strategy and equity award distribution as compensation committee chair. I accelerated growth rate and created the ESG that greenlighted $125 million in Series C financing from SoftBank Vision Fund 2. SoftBank participated in a $300 million round for fitness wearables maker Whoop and a $100 million funding round for Fanatics owned Candy Digital, the developer of Major League Baseball's NFT marketplace. I am also an advisory board member of structured finance Opal Group, and I'm so happy to be here today on the eve of the 50th anniversary of Title IX, the civil rights law that prohibits federally funded schools from discriminating on the basis of sex. Last month, a landmark new collective bargaining agreement was announced regarding the U.S. women's national soccer team. This agreement, which puts the women's team on par with their male counterparts, may provide a framework for other organizations on how to flatten pay disparities. This agreement, which was settled in February, was in reaction to a $24 million equal pay suit between the women's national soccer team and the U.S. Soccer Federation. According to the labor agreement, the women's and men's team will share FIFA World Cup prize money and collect appearance fees and bonuses and shares of commercial revenue. This agreement comes after a history of FIFA's practice of awarding larger prizes in men's contests. Not only does this agreement have an impact on equal pay, but also has the potential to improve the training and paying environment of the teams. Prior to this agreement, other teams in Australia, Brazil, England, and Norway have announced equal pay for men and women teams. However, these agreements, and within these agreements, the World Cup prize money was excluded. So it led the pay to still be out of balance. That is why the announcement from the U.S. national team is historic. The prizes FIFA grants for qualifying, advancing through, and winning the World Cup diverges considerably for the men and women's teams. This year, the bonus pool for the men's championship is $400 million. The women's is $60 million for next year. However, now the two teams will pool the bonuses together from 2022 and 2023 contests, then evenly splitting the batch. This will continue for the games in 2026 and 2027. And this is true equal pay between two teams. While this can lead to tension between the teams as the men have the potential to contribute more to the overall haul, the teams, I believe, are currently comfortable. Historically, the women's teams have performed very well. The US men's team has never won a World Cup in the 90 years of its existence, while the women's team has taken title 4 times since 1991. Therefore, it is possible and likely there will be years when the women do very well and the men don't, and the women's team will still have to share their bonus money with the men despite the FIFA prize money being smaller for the women. This agreement may act as a blueprint for other organizations looking to achieve equal pay, especially those federations that are organized like US Soccer, such as college sports teams. This deal also included non-economic terms, such as improving player conditions, player health and safety, data privacy. A few of the benefits are only for the women's team, including parental leave and short-term disability. Prior to the agreement, the women's team CBAs afforded guaranteed salaries. Now, the women's team will use the pay-to-play structure as the men's team. This structure compensates players with set appearance fees and game bonuses based on the team's overall performance and the opposing squad's rank. This change removes a significant barrier to the women's equal pay. And I've asked myself, how did the team make these strides? It started with litigation, ended with a settlement, then resulted in an agreement. However, as we were preparing for this panel, we talked about, do we really need to take this path every single time? We could use this agreement as a blueprint and ask, how do we achieve consistent, equitable access in any industry or organization? I believe the best path to create equitable pay is for the key stakeholders in sport, for the leagues and teams, to communicate and move together towards pay equity. Note that I didn't say the employees because it is not their problems to solve. We consistently put the burden on the employees to make these changes. The problem is, with the current state of the world, from the January 6th insurrection hearings to the markets entering their territory all just last week, we're always just one crisis away from any progress quickly being destroyed. The burden should not fall on the employees. Now, we stand with an opportunity to create systematic change and achieve more equity. There is a future like the Matrix, in which people are attached to devices and are living their lives in a virtual world. This is the metaverse. Very soon, we will live in a world where remote work meetings in the metaverse are common, and corporations will be rushing to buy virtual property. Today, we will review the myth around how pay programs work and how companies are choosing to be more transparent. We will also redefine rewards and have a better rewards discussion with employees. We will review the role and definition of each pay element: base salary, cash awards, incentives, equity, and unlimited PTO. We will discuss examples of how organizations communicate what they value by removing negotiation at time of hire, disclosing pay ranges and career paths. Then we will explore and discuss the path to greater transparency. Finally, we will talk about compensation management and what's so different these days. Internal transparency and employer relation considerations has changed dramatically over the years. The age of the metaverse and all this information in the palm of our hands is driving transparency. This has impact across several different dimensions. We're also seeing laws change in the US, as previously mentioned. We're also seeing changes globally. We are seeing these trends more and more. I believe that this is only the beginning. This has led companies being transparent with employees and discussing pay more openly. While negotiating a salary for base pay is a common practice and negotiating salaries is an expected part of the recruitment effort, it ends up being problematic because it often leads to pay inequities in the long term. Manager discretion, as Sarah mentioned before, is often included in compensation programs. However, companies must analyze the practice. Too much discretion is where it becomes troublesome. Compensation is just one factor of a broader employee experience. As employers, we must think about the employee life cycle. Who are you? What is your employer brand? And then think about, how are you hiring people? How are you starting their pay? How are you onboarding them? How are you building their capabilities? And then rewarding them for their performance? How are you advancing them, giving them promotions? Then how do you prevent them from separating from the company, if you can? Or how do you make sure that as they leave the organization in this great resignation, which invariably some will, can they be ambassadors for the organization and for the employer brand? These are the details that employers think about when they're thinking about workplace equity. It is about making sure we're making all these decisions, and these decisions impact employees in the fairest possible way. Could we simplify it? And how does it impact how we go forward? With compensation, traditionally, we're thinking about three elements: base salary, variable pay, and long-term incentive. Base salary must market competitive and measuring internal value. When we examine market competition, we look at who we compete with and where do we operate. For internal value, employers evaluate the employee's level of impact on business. Employers must ask how they quantify that, how they look at that critically and make sure they are measuring that in the right way. And how do we bring those things together and arrive at the base salary? Base salary, we don't talk about performance at all because performance cannot be differentiated using base salary. For long-term incentive, employers think about the use of stock or options, where it helps employees internalize a sense of ownership and focusing them on the long-term view. PTO is one. PTO goes to well-being, how an employer is delivering on the sense of overall well-being. For example, it is huge that employees feel cared for, supported, and safe. That was emphasized in the pandemic, and the companies that did that will be remembered. Finally, recognition is often not formalized and not optimized. Making sure that accomplishments are celebrated and people are celebrated makes people feel like they belong in the company culture and with the organization. It is a way employers can operationalize recognition and give people the tools to recognize the talent of their coworkers. It is an extremely powerful tool. The reality is, when we look at it from an analytics point of view, starting pay is a factor that drives pay inequity because most employees' salaries don't change much from when they started, and the promotion is based on that salary. So the next step is that employees should reward performance through incentives. This ensures that it doesn't create inequities that increase over time. The next step is ensuring that there are equitable, inclusive, consistent onboarding practices. Employers can make sure that new employees are brought into the culture, they're connecting with their coworkers. This is very important for them to develop in their role. Finally, there is advancement and opportunity. This is providing opportunities through mentorship and training, posting roles internally, and making sure everyone is aware of the opportunities. Sure. What I'm seeing is that investors are increasingly tying ESG metrics to pay. And so for the S and ESG, the SEC proposed rules for human capital disclosures that comprise of the disclosure of diversity, equity, and inclusion. ESG metrics are fundamentally connected to a company's long-term business strategy. Therefore, investors are asking questions about human capital performance to understand the investment thesis sustainability. So ultimately, you want to manage the narrative, as you've been saying, Daniela, through these disclosures and reporting. These disclosures are how we're telling this story to our investors. Organizations need to look at human capital as an investment and consequently looking at pay equity as an investment. On the shareholders side, shareholders are demanding an increase in disclosure. It shows that people investing in companies right now are accustomed to more transparency and see that the companies are being right and doing the right thing. They want to be assured of the long-term value. Employees want transparency. So consequently, companies need to be ready to talk about compensation. In the past, people were told not to talk about pay and salary, but that is now changing. Employees are insisting we talk about pay because it means they will have more information that they need to ensure that they're being paid fairly. This in turn puts pressure on companies to ensure that as employees feel that the companies are acting and paying fairly. Now companies are being transparent and discussing what the companies are basing pay on and showing how they're going to be paying their employees. As mentioned earlier, I believe the best path to create equitable pay is for the key stakeholders in sports to work together to demand pay equity. The critical stakeholders are the leagues and teams. However, access is elusive. The challenge is that these stakeholders rarely have the opportunity to come to the same table at the same time with a specific purpose of building an actionable plan. So let's rewrite the playbook, stakeholders together to create a plan to take on pay equity to the next level. The bigger issue I see on the whole is the infrastructure, while pay equity is a symptom. So once we work on the infrastructure, then we can work on pay equity. Once we have committed to fixing the infrastructure, we have the catalyst for the other stakeholders to move together and take these steps. And these steps include equitable compensation models, player safety, league staffing, compensation for players and team personnel. We must first create a resilient infrastructure that continuously evolves to withstand these crises. So as we've been saying, that there's pressure coming in from every angle to expand equality from employees, global legislatures, peer companies, SEC, investors, clients, and consumers. So employers must go further.